Asma, welcome to Planet America.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me.
Asma, can you explain to an Australian audience why you were demonstrating at the DNC last week?
Yeah, so it didn't really even start out as a demonstration. I was one of 30 uncommitted delegates at the DNC, or the Democratic National Convention. And we were uncommitted because we had not yet decided on in our primary who to vote for. So way back in February, March, and April, we had our Democratic presidential primaries. And during that time, I helped run a campaign in Minnesota. That was an uncommitted campaign. I started a protest vote against President Biden's handling of the war in Gaza. So myself and other organizers got together to do this. And then in my state, in Minnesota, you have to go through a really long process of being elected a delegate. So I became an at-large delegate, meaning I was representing 46,000 people who voted uncommitted in the primary to send me to the DNC last week. So last week we showed up. 30 of us were uncommitted. But then as we were there, we were talking to Harris delegates and talking to them about a ceasefire and an arms embargo. And over 300 Harris delegates joined us to become ceasefire delegates, and they called themselves ceasefire delegates. And on Wednesday night, so our biggest asks, of course, are a ceasefire and an arms embargo because we want the war in Gaza to stop. We want them to stop killing babies. That's like our core ask. But the smaller ask, we set another really low bar for the DNC, really, was to have a Palestinian American speaker on the main stage because they'd had a family of Israeli hostages speak. And so we thought, in our Democratic National Convention platform, it says that Palestinian lives and Israeli lives are valued equally. So we wanted to have that shown on the main stage. We were told for 2 months, so this is like not a new ask. We were told for 2 months that, it wasn't a yes, it wasn't a no. People were working on it and they would get back to us. Same thing this last week. And then finally, on the eve of the last day of the convention, they called us at 8 p.m. and they said no. And they said it wasn't the DNC themselves, so not like the convention conveners themselves, but it was the Harris campaign that did not want a Palestinian American on the stage.
So why do you think it was that the Harris campaign denied you that speaking slot? Were they just worried about a possible controversy?
So we sent them a long list of speakers that, state representatives, we have a member of Congress. We sent them a list of speakers that they could choose from, that they could vet themselves. They were vetting all of the speeches. And we talked to all of the speakers and nobody even called them to ask if they were interested. So they never really engaged in the process in good faith, which was really frustrating. And then we had the speech that we were going to have. One of the speakers, her name is Ro Roman. She's a Georgia state representative, and she shared her speech. And in her speech, she actually endorses Vice President Harris. So there was nothing like unfitting that went into the speech. It was very clearly like, I'm a Democrat. Here's what we need to do to unite. And also like, we need to be saving Palestinian lives. There was nothing in the speech that was controversial. And so it was, again, just frustrating. And so we sat down on Wednesday night, literally. I mean, we sat down in front of the United Center, myself and like a bunch of other uncommitted delegates. And we're like, we're not moving until we get a different answer. And they refused to give us a different answer.
So why do you think the Democrats made that decision?
There are a lot of theories. It really doesn't make sense to me because the bar was so low and we got support from members of Congress who came and visited us while we were sitting down and doing our sit-in. There were senators, there were actually even hostage families saying we should be hearing from a Palestinian American on stage. This doesn't make any sense. So it didn't make any sense to really anyone. And I think that they lost like core members of the base. So it was something that we were seeing, like we were thinking like, let us help you win in November. Let us help you show that you are a united campaign, that you can bring in voters from all different backgrounds. And they missed an opportunity. And so that was something, as a lifelong Democrat who organizes for Democrats up and down the ballot, it was really hard for me to think that they intentionally missed this opportunity.
And Asma, what did you make of the way in which both President Biden and Vice President Harris talked about the protests and the Palestinian cause? Did that represent any degree of progress to your mind?
I was there during President Biden's speech and Vice President Harris's speeches. So the sit-in was only I say, was only like 16 hours. But Those are words, John. And I want to make it clear that we weren't looking for words, and Palestinian children who are starving to death right now and are being fed bombs don't want words. They want actual policy. I work on policy at the state level. I'm sure it's difficult at the federal level, but it is really not that difficult to say I'm not going to send another bomb to kill children. And that's been the very basic ask we've been making. And then last week, well, now it's Monday, but a week and a half ago, President Biden is talking about a ceasefire and then sends another $20 billion to the Israeli military. So that makes me wonder, like, are these negotiations in good faith? Because the US cannot be a neutral actor if we were supplying the bombs to the Israeli government, right? And usually when ceasefire negotiations are going on or any negotiations are happening, there has to be a neutral actor, and the US is not one. We are supplying the weapons.
So many Democrats see Harris as more likely to be sympathetic to the Palestinian cause than Joe Biden. First, is there any evidence for that? And second, do you agree?
I think when President Biden stepped down, there was a moment when I thought, well, thank God, because he has clearly shared that he does not care about Palestinian lives. He's said that he's a Zionist through and through. And so when Vice President Harris, was passed the torch, I thought this could be a good thing. And she has met with leaders of uncommitted. She has shown sympathy, but again, none of that has been followed by policy. And there was even a moment when she said to our uncommitted leaders, like, I'm willing to have a conversation with you about an arms embargo. And then the next day, her foreign policy advisor said, actually, because that conversation was leaked, actually the president or the vice president does not want an arms embargo, is not interested in talking about an arms embargo. So I think, again, that the words can be there and the policy isn't. A few weeks ago, she released an economic policy that was very different. It deviated from President Biden's. I'm wondering why Gaza is different when you could unite the base. Over 80% of Democrats support a permanent and immediate ceasefire. A majority of Democrats support an arms embargo. They do not want to be sending bombs to kill children. They actually want to fund things like healthcare and reproductive rights and public education. And we're wondering, why isn't she taking this moment to listen to voters and build and expand the base? And people are feeling really disenfranchised.
And Asma, why do you think it is that both Biden and Harris remain so firmly opposed to any arms embargo against Israel? Is it out of fear that Israel itself could be about to come under attack from Iran or its proxies?
I mean, I think the best thing to do to de-escalate tension is to stop bombing civilians. And I think that has really caused a lot of the tension within the region, right? Israel has right now, I have friends and friends who have family in Lebanon right now that are being bombed and are having to evacuate. And the cause of all the tension is the Israeli government bombing and putting airstrikes out on southern Lebanon, killing folks in Iran. So I think the biggest thing, the biggest piece of that de-escalation would be an arms embargo. And because of that, we are seen as this like complicit, like shadow proxy actor in this. And I think, again, as an American, it's really frustrating to hear people who are worried that we are entering into another forever war by supplying the weapons.
So Kamala Harris has previously said to protesters that if you want to see Donald Trump elected, you should just keep talking. How do you respond to the idea that by protesting Harris, you are supporting Trump?
Yeah, I would tell them that I've been doing this for much longer than them, first. And secondly, what I am trying to do as a lifelong Democrat is to win against Donald Trump in November. I am a visible Muslim woman. You could never catch me wearing this at the Republican National Convention. This is my political home. The Democratic Party is my political home. So I'm trying to make it possible for other people who look like me, other people who want a ceasefire, who want an arms embargo, to be able to come in and be like, this is my party. And the base really does want this, right? So we are saying this is the way to defeat Trump. We are giving a gift to Vice President Harris by saying this is actually what's going to win over voters in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania, in Virginia, all states that they're worried about because they're swing states, right? And if we're really worried and concerned about the swing states, then we need to be focusing on the voters there. And the campaign has shown again and again that they're not a concern.
So, Asma, if there is a ceasefire in the weeks or next month or two, does that change the way you're feeling towards both Biden and Harris?
No, absolutely not. An arms embargo is the goal. And I think that people are using the word ceasefire so broadly now that it kind of has lost its meaning. And I've said this so many times that I say it in my sleep now that you cannot have a ceasefire without an arms embargo. You cannot say, okay, I'm going to keep giving you the weapons, just don't use them. Have we been shown, how many times have we been shown that the Israeli government has a rogue military that is willing to violate international human rights law, American law, its own laws in order to occupy and oppress Palestinians? So I don't think so. And I think that there are people who have a really hard red line on this, and I don't blame them. Like, genocide should be a red line for voters.
So, Asma, at this stage, what do you anticipate is going to happen there on November the 5th? Uncommitted voters on the Democratic side simply going to stay at home now?
Yeah, I mean, and I want to make it clear that our movement has been multiracial, multi-generational, multi-faith. I'm not Arab myself, and I've been in this movement because I care about saving lives. And there are people who are not going to show up in November because they want to support a campaign and a candidate that does save lives. They don't want to be party to genocide, and that's part of what people are feeling right now. And I don't begrudge them that. Like, I know that that's a really difficult decision to make. And there are other people who are saying, well, there's only one way to defeat Donald Trump. We are in a binary voting system, and it's Harris or Trump. So make your decision. And there are people pushing back on that. So I think on November 5th, if there's no ceasefire, if there's no arms embargo, there were almost 1 million voters, uncommitted voters from across the nation, from, again, multiracial, multi-generational, multi-faith, in key swing states. If they don't show up, it's our election to lose. And that terrifies me because I've lived through one Trump presidency. I do not want to live with another under my belt. And I would hope that the Harris campaign is willing to listen and is willing to choose voters over a foreign military.
Asma Mohammed, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Julia.